the intent of this exercise is to start educating all of you on what is energy resilience. So with that, this first question, we will pass the mic around the table and they will introduce themselves and then describe how their job related to energy has changed. And again, keep it brief. And then on the second two questions, it is going to be more of a dialogue between the five of these folks where we'll have somebody start and then we may go across the table, however the discussion goes. All right, everybody knows the rules of the game here. All right, who would like to kick us off? Caleb, I'll pick on you and have you introduce yourself and describe your relation to energy and how your job's changed.
All right. I'm used to talking for a week straight, so bear with me. My name is Caleb Cook. My background is, I would say, professional drunk for the better part of 2 decades, and then I washed up on the front staff of a community action agency and landed a position as a residential energy auditor. That position and the community that I served, along with my wife, who should get credit, ultimately saved my life and changed the trajectory of it dramatically. So I spent some years performing residential energy audits for the low-income modernization program, ultimately left to do commercial audits, and now I am part owner, along with some partners, of a democratically owned and democratically operated training organization which provides training to field staff for the weatherization program. The ways that my job has changed have changed because my job has changed. My impact has changed. I've gone from impacting single homes to the entire Midwest now. I have new challenges, which is convincing builders and financiers and government officials to essentially throw out generations of building knowledge, in some cases adapting it to this new building science, so that it, in the hopes, the trust, that it eventually these new practices become common knowledge and duh things, instead of like some ancient Confucian secret.
All right, thank you.
We'll pass it on to Terry.
Yeah. I'm Terry Rosenthal, currently the CEO of the Cleveland Electric Cooperative. We are an electric distribution utility covering parts of 6 counties based out of Lebanon, Missouri. We serve about 37,000 homes and businesses, and then we also own the distribution system on Fort Leonard Wood and provide service to that military base. I would say that, as I mentioned, I'm currently the CEO, but I spent 30 years as the manager of engineering there, and there's been quite a bit of change in our industry. I can say the day that I actually walked commencement here at S&T on a Saturday, I moved to Lebanon, and on Sunday I went to work at Cleveland Electric Monday morning, nearly 33 years ago. But the technology I had at home was better than the technology we had at the co-op when I joined. So the addition of communication systems, meters now that report service quality issues at every location, control of our breakers and distribution system have all changed the way we do business, and the way we're able to provide electric service to all the homes and businesses and all the members that are part of the Electric. So it's been a big change. Of course, now as a CEO, my role is completely different. I don't spend as much time in technology, which is somewhat disheartening, but my role today is more of the strategy and vision and communicating with our board of directors and building a good team around the Electric. So completely different job, but also the way we do business is completely different than it was 30 plus years ago.
Very good. My name is Chad Davis. I'm the engineering manager here at Walden Utilities. For RMU, our customer focus is the citizens of the city of Rolla. We serve about 10,000 electric meters, basically for the 20,000 folks and students and university and everybody here in Rolla. As a municipally owned city department and operating electric water system here in Rolla. For me, the change personally has been a lot about as a civil engineering graduate, not from S&T, I'm a transplant, but at some point in time, as a civil engineering graduate, getting into the electric industry 20 years ago, took a lot of adjustment to figure out, especially as that was more on the administrative and business side of it, for the business operations of electric as opposed to keeping the system operational, that the transition that the generation is not generally locally, dealing with transmission, dealing with power supply contracts, all those kinds of issues that go around keeping the lights on and reliable electric service locally. They're administratively sometimes out of your own control. So, and one of the other hats that I wear is chair of our wholesale power supply committee. That's a group of 35 cities around Missouri that manages our wholesale power supply electrics for those 35 cities. I chair the committee of that. We have a staff that deals with that, the technical issues. But it's been an interesting, and it's very sick. A lot of the technology change, and I couple that with the expectations of our customers have also dramatically changed over the years too. They're expecting instantaneous information, just like we all get right here for everything. So thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Belcher, and I am a builder, not just by trade, but by birthright. I'm the second generation. My daughter is the third generation. And I grew up and I can totally relate to what Caleb was saying about we've always done it this way syndrome. But we haven't. We've done it above and beyond. I was fortunate to get to work in Callaway Nuclear Plant when it was being constructed, got certified as an inspector, and I left that job, or the job left me, and I went to St. Louis as a code official. And so I've been working on that aspect, even though I've stayed in the building business. I've been heavily involved with codes, and especially energy codes and building codes, and all the resiliency that is being brought into those, not just on the energy side, but certainly with storm damages and resilient buildings, fire, etc. We're building our own little net zero energy home. We live up in a place called Jade Prairie. It's not on the map for a reason, and so it's not far from here. But just our biggest concerns, obviously, we want to be resilient, energy efficient, but also wildfires and high winds are our biggest energy. So we have to put that whole portfolio together. Some of the biggest changes we've seen are more resiliency put in, more of the technology. I know on the commercial side has made it easier on the residential side because the technology's developed there, especially with controls, things like that. You know, people have cars that do all these things for them. Well, why can't my house do that? And so the good thing is the things that we have to build with now are so much better than they were 10 or 20 years ago. More concentration on building science and the building envelope. We've always built above code, even back in the 90s when I left my building official job, when the energy code was first brought in, and we tightened buildings up and made all kinds of problems and learned from that. But we did it from a market standpoint and still do. You know, our competition says our price is business 101, so we have to do an above code job for a right size building and still be cost competitive. So fortunately, it's easier to do that with the technology today. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Justin Sherwood. My academic background is in geography, environmental policy, and economics. My entire career has been in civil service, and I'm currently a policy planner with Missouri Department of Natural Resources Division of Energy. Some of the biggest changes in my career have been understanding the relationship in the American system between federal and state governments. It's really interesting relationship to work in. And then also in specific to the energy sector is this ebb and flow of congressional investment in energy. It could be any infrastructure type sector, but energy right now is good. So we normally see a decade or 15-year ebb and flow in massive infrastructure funding from the federal government to the states. And that's a big challenge that I've seen in my career, having to kind of plan and deploy these massive amounts of federal funding in the states in a rapid fashion. And then what you do when all that funding is gone and you have 10 years of funding drought, and how do you prepare for the next eventual massive funding opportunity that you don't know exactly what it's going to look like, and engage communities across your state to try and plan in the off season, like you say, for the next big wave in federal funding, so that you can more rapidly deploy that investment in your community.
Okay, thank you all. So moving along to question 2, what makes energy resilience difficult in rural Missouri communities? And a part of that can be specifically what is the problem that makes it difficult? So any of you who wants to start out, again, this part of it will be more of a discussion, and you can pass the microphone back and forth. We do ask that you keep your responses to about a minute or two to ensure we stay on time.
I gave a quick start off here, and sticking with that theme of planning and federal funding, I think a struggle that we see is, or challenge is just investment, whether it's financial or just effort in manpower, by local community members. Community leaders, doesn't necessarily have to be government, in that time investment to plan and prepare in the off season when you don't have funding. We see a lot of time planning and preparation is funding dependent, and that in itself is a challenge because you want to be prepared beforehand, and it's a tug of war. And I don't have a solution. It's just that's a challenge.
Just to go back to one thing I referred to, and Catherine, my colleague from MIA, is here, so cover your ears. But getting the market to respond, getting the parts of the market, the appraisals. Nothing happens in the financing of anything without an appraisal. And if the appraisal doesn't understand what they're looking at or how to evaluate it, which is required by state law, then that's getting over that hurdle for more industry acceptance, because you can build it all day long, commercial or residential, but if that's not recognized in the financing equation, then then people are resistant, obviously, to be able to do that sort of thing on the business side. Then just more awareness, and you touched on it too, with the workforce. Getting the workforce trained. We have some really good crews that understand now what they're doing, but you're still, especially in rural areas, because you drop the rock in the pond and the waves spread out, and so they're starting to get there. But the workforce is critical to that too. That's where the rubber meets the road.
For us, as a relatively rural electric system, which granted we're 20,000 people, relatively decent sized community, but at one time, in the economy of scale, we're still fairly small in the overall electric world. So the economy of scale is a really big deal because for us, as opposed to a city that's, or a large utility like an Ameren or a large utility locally owned like a Springfield or folks like that, the economy of scale to build our own generating facilities that we rely 100% on our own generation, have very little outside need for others. We rely for 99% probably, or roughly, of our energy to be imported from other facilities generating. So we're relying upon transmission. We're relying upon other generating facilities. We have a lot of active interest in managing that, but at the same point in time, it's a reliance that you have to deal with it. So an economy of scale to be able to build those facilities on your own here locally becomes a very big challenge. And economy of scale too of the number of customers that you have. It's the number of the density of customers that you have to build a distribution system to serve. So things like that.
Yeah, I would say from electric distribution, nobody likes their lights to go out at home. We don't like it either. But we cover, 37,000 members, but we have to do that. It takes us almost 5,000 miles of line. So very low density comparatively to urban and suburban areas. And so vegetation, wildlife, all of these things play into keeping our system resilient, and that it can withstand weather events or storms, and then also be recovered quickly. And when we do have events, now technology is helping us with the recovery portion because we're able to better determine right away where the problem is instead of sending a whole bunch of linemen and truck out to troubleshoot and figure out where the problem is and taking hours to do that. Technology's aided in that. But the big issue is why is it so difficult is you have to balance the reliability with the affordability. Our members, if we were to build it where it never could withstand any storm that came along the way, then our members couldn't afford it. And likewise, we could build it really, really cheap, but every time the wind blows, the lights are going to go out. So, that's that balancing side of things is getting it value engineered correctly, or we're spending the right amount of money to be as resilient as possible, but not overspending to where nobody can afford their electric bill.
Okay, I'm going to try and keep this to the 2-minute thing. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Since I got into this industry, I developed a passion for it, particularly the community aspect. And the only way this industry grows, and the only way, frankly, that we succeed as a community and as a species is to overcome any of these problems. And what I've boiled it down to, I think, is just a couple of things. One, Matt mentioned earlier, the way we've always done things. This is an expression that I hear with some regularity, and it makes me absolutely sick and furious. There was what is called the new solution paradox. When somebody proposes a solution to a problem, a new solution to a problem, the typical first response from people is to say, yeah, but will it work? Without asking, is the system that we're currently utilizing working? Is it meeting our goals? What are the downfalls and pitfalls and problems we're creating by maintaining the status quo? Those, in my view, are by and large the largest issue. I think they stem from division. It is easier to keep the status quo when people are divided. And we see this in our society now, and the consequences of it. I'm confident that when we eventually overcome that, and our propensity to look at each other's plates and say, have you got more than I do? Instead of saying, have you got enough?
Yes.
Then we will get past these issues.
All right, thank you all. And so let me remind you, after this next question, we open the floor to all of you and engage you in this discussion and ask you to ask our experts questions. So if you haven't thought of a question or two, be doing that. So the last question I have, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you do to address the challenges and what's making energy resilience difficult in rural communities?
I wish that all of you and all of us would put me out of a job. In a very real sense, the goal of the energy efficiency industry, in many ways, is to work ourselves out of a job. I would like to see a day when there's nothing I can teach anyone, because all of these things, these building science practices, energy efficiency, and energy conservation practices are headbanging against the wall, stupid, obvious. When that happens, what I think it will take to do that is for your generation, most of your generation, and what's left of mine, to be fearless, to be unafraid to question the status quo, to be unafraid to throw the Rockefeller babies out with the trickle-down bathwater, and to take risks and to screw up and to pay prices and consequences and make generational change. Because until that happens, the societal issues that we have that I don't see it day to day anymore, but that I used to working on community action, speaking with people who make choices between heat in the winter and food on the table, or lights for their children to do homework, or insulin to stay alive. When we solve the issues that generate that, by being unafraid to change things, then I will be out of a job and grateful. And that's a pretty low bar, to be clear, not letting people freeze to death. So, last thing, and then I'll shut up. I think regularly about a quote by Stephen Jay Gould, who, when asked if he wanted to check out, for lack of a better word, Einstein's brain. Stephen Jay Gould is a paleontologist and evolutionary biologist. He said, I'm somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that countless people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. And I think when we all adopt that same idea, the fearlessness will come.
I would say, the majority of our resiliency issues, as far as keeping the electricity flowing to everybody's homes and businesses, we've made a lot of strides in technology, but I think where we're heading is a lot more grid analytics and grid communications as to here is a problem that's arising instead of here is where the problem happened. And when we get to that point, I think then we build resiliency and by taking care of those issues before they occur. And I think we're starting to see a lot of it today. But we still have a long way to go, and it makes it a lot more challenging when you're working in a rural environment, again, spread across farmlands and vegetation and terrain that in this part of Southwest Missouri is challenging, to say the least. So I'd love to wave a magic wand and say we've got it today, and we can do these things, but I'd say I'm optimistic that it's coming, and hopefully I'd love to say to everybody here, your lights will never go off, but I don't see that happening, but I'd sure like to minimize it.
Yeah, and we've built such a reliable industry over the last 100+ years that the expectation is there that the lights are always on. So we've been, as an industry, done a great job to create a very high level of expectation. And I think that's going to be a lot of the basis of challenge going forward is how do we transition to the next generation of electric generating fleets, renewable resources, transmission, and those kind of things all puzzle or pieced together to provide that reliability. Because as utilities, it's not that we're trying to take a position generally of pro-renewable or anti-renewable or anything like that. It's trying to balance that with reliability and costs, but also trying to be able to, as that generation changes, those renewable resources are available in certain parts of the country and not necessarily other parts. And a lot of the times that's very remotely located relative to the loads. So you got to be able to build it, and you got to be able to get it to where you need it to serve the customers. And storage is just not practical yet for electric like it is for water. So trying to generate it real time as it's needed becomes a real balance.
Yeah, kind of further that off the utility side to the industry side is if I was going to wave the wand, besides the financing aspect, is the 98.5% of all buildings are more than 20 years old, and that is where the bulk of the energy demand is, not in use stuff. And that also helps if we can address that, the existing things, that helps take the strain off the infrastructure, especially for new capacity. Austin, Texas was the 26th largest metropolitan area in the country, and they saw a huge population growth. Everybody was moving to Austin, and because you want to be weird. And Austin Power and Light had a dilemma because there's no way. Even if we had the money to build generating capacity, we just don't have the means. And so they gathered a lot of stakeholders, the building industry and other users, and came up with a plan to reduce demand. And that slowed down that growth. They could manage it. And that whole program is the granddaddy of what is now Energy Star. And so, we can do the same thing on the rural side of it also. We love living in the rural. Our co-op is tremendous. We have less outages out in the sticks than we did when we were underneath Ameren, and quicker fixes. But that's what I think we need to do. It's a long trot to educate the public, especially us out here. But it needs to be done because that's going to really make immediate returns on the investment as far as demand. And also, the money, the government money and everything else that's being poured into solar fields and other generating capacity could certainly be offset with demand on the demand side. The first fuel is the fuel you don't use. So if you can, mitigate that, you're in good shape. So, and then portfolios of energy. We build with natural gas or propane if it's on site. Obviously, the electric utility is there. We'll use solar PV for power. We'll use solar thermal for water. And so you put that portfolio together, no matter what the market does, you're kind of in better shape and resilient.
Whoa. I think that segues really good into one of my things. If I could wave a magic wand, I would implore all public sector leaders to really take the effort to undertake planning exercises with their community stakeholders, public and private sector, to do these kind of planning exercises, future looking for the growth of their communities, and things at smaller scales like energy audits of the entire sector, not in anticipation of anything or not in response to anything, but for their holistic benefits of trying to improve their community and make them more sustainable in many different ways. The other thing, if I could wave a magic wand, is to reduce the boom and bust of, at least from the public side, the federal funding side of things, instead of having federal funding. So if anyone's going to become, a politician or an energy planner, to really smooth those peaks of the federal funding, because that then gets back to what Mr. Belcher was saying about workforce development. I think a lot of problems we see workforce development is exacerbated by these boom and busts of energy investments, because one, you're going to have that lag time of implementing energy efficiency or energy work, because you need to build up that workforce in response to that. And then all that funding dries up, and then they all lose their jobs or have to transition to other workforces. And it's just, it doesn't seem efficient from a planning perspective. So that's what I would change with my next one.
Okay, thank you all. Okay, now is the time for us to engage all of you in this discussion. Hopefully you have generated a very good question or two. I will bring the microphone around. We want to make sure that we can all hear your question. Who would like to kick things off for us?
I live in the Phelps County outside Raleigh, and my question is, trying to be resilient at my house. Who in Raleigh or Phelps County can put a solar panel on the roof, put that in your garage?
Without what?
Solar panel on my roof, and power, and a battery in my garage to store that energy, and maybe even sell it back.
Maybe
Yeah.
free energy.
Yeah, and there are local local developers that can do that type of work. Generally, we don't make recommendations or provide suggestions or folks, but they're available. There's local. A lot of our customers that install facilities such as those, they do come from contractors around the state or even around the region. There's a lot of folks that develop those type of facilities. As utilities, and not to put words in Terry's mouth, but I think we would provide a consistent kind of feedback on those type of facilities too. Is for the customers as utilities, we're not pro or anti those facilities for customer generation facilities, but an encouragement to reach out to your utility provider to understand the economics of the rate structures, and all the details associated with it. For cities, also reaching out, we encourage customers to reach out and talk to the building codes officials because those type of permits where building codes are applicable, making sure they are ready to go with those before they develop the project and have a building code permitting question during construction. The other thing about those type of facilities is that maybe a point of awareness too or thoughtfulness is sometimes the customer-owned generating facilities aren't necessarily, well, they may be thought about, I think, for resiliency and sustainability. I think there's maybe a disconnect there too because the resiliency, the way they're generally connected and developed are going to be that, like a hurricane. I've got a son who lives in Louisiana and they lost power the last couple of days. Fortunately, it's come back on fairly quick. But the facility may not operate when the regular utility system's not available. So it may not be resilient. But at the same point in time, if the battery's there, then the battery can provide that backup service for a period of time, however big that battery is and whatever it's designed for and what loads it can support. So it's a complex and very significant decision, as I know we kind of note at times on those. It's frequently the second largest investment a customer ever makes behind their house itself, because they can be more expensive than the car you got. So it's a very significant investment. Sometimes there's unfortunately some horror stories. Folks didn't do a lot of homework before they made a commitment to make that very large investment. Sorry for the length of that discussion.
That's good enough for me.
If I can add something briefly. Resiliency, I think, is one very nice word for several different components. There's lots of things that go into it. It's my opinion that it's important to not just consider the amount of energy generated on site and how it's stored, but also the amount required to use. If I make a $1,000 a month pension, I can survive off that if my monthly expenses are only $10. But if it costs $900 for mortgage, then I am hungry. So by investing in the structure of your home, the building envelope, insulation levels that tightens, passive heating and cooling strategies, then on-site generation and storage is really simply a stopgap measure until the project's complete.
Yeah. Yeah, Caleb beat me to it, basically. We do the exact same thing. But to add on top of that, in addition to your question, as a civil servant, I would just recommend, in addition to that, investing in a home energy audit and getting the results of that home energy audit and considering other energy efficiency measures that are included in that audit. In addition to, if you want to install CLE home, please also consider all that energy efficiency improvements.
Justin, who keeps a list of registered energy auditors in the state of Missouri?
That's a great question. It's not currently up on the DNR website.
Oh, who's supposed to be keeping that list? DNR manages certified energy auditors. It's not up, but could they contact you?
Yes, absolutely. You can call Missouri Department of Natural Resources Division of Energy or find us online. Send us an email and we will help put you in touch.
Or reach out to local community action agency. Taking off.
All right, who is ready with another question?
Thank you. My question is kind of building on that. It's about energy efficiency. So the story of the city of Austin's attempt to reduce overall demand, even during a period of economic growth, I think is a really compelling one. And our regulated utilities, so Ameren, Evergy, Liberty, they engage in these processes kind of that are regulated at the state level, cycles of programs to implement energy efficiency kind of across their rate base. And from my understanding, smaller utilities, cooperatives don't necessarily, and municipal utilities don't necessarily go through that same process. But I know that many do offer programs throughout the state. I'm just curious, like, what efforts are happening in more rural areas to maybe engage in more holistic energy efficiency programming with the community action agencies, implementers, and others in the service areas.
So what? That's a you gentlemen question.
I agree, depends on the utility, and co-ops are locally, I can only speak to co-ops, and of course, municipal electrics are very similar, but from a co-op perspective, every co-op is locally governed, locally managed by our member owners. The people that are buying electricity from us own our organization. They elect a board of directors, and the board of directors sets policies and procedures. So every co-op is different. And there's an adage in our co-op world that says, you've seen one co-op, you've seen one co-op. So, but I can tell you that in our case, we try to, part of the principles of being a co-op is concern for community and community involvement. So plus these are our member owners, they own us. So we're trying to take care of them. So we engage in energy audits and energy efficiency programs. We engage in financial commitments to when they implement these recommended energy audit or energy programs. And we also offer financial benefits to improving the efficiencies of the appliances and the HVAC units that they have in their home. So it changes from year to year based on what our board financial commitments can be, based on what we can afford. But for the most part, those programs have been in place for a long, long time.
I might add on to what Terry was saying, that for us as a municipal utility, and this is going to vary depending on the different municipal utilities, like the co-ops, is each one's locally regulated by our customers, our city council, our board of public works in our case, that we're setting that direction and guidance. But probably one of the biggest difficulties of implementing some of those local energy efficiency programs, that we're here to help support our customers. They're the folks that own us too, in the case of a city. And I would agree with Matt and Caleb that they're talking about energy efficiency improvements are some of the best dollars that a customer can spend to avoid having some of those other investments, whether it's just their energy costs on a monthly basis that they can avoid. Generally, we don't get real active in supplementing and incentivizing those energy efficiency programs, largely because of economics. Because if the incentives that we put to those programs are dollars that we've got to pay, that we collect from our customers, that then we pay for a program. So sometimes it comes down to, instead of supporting another program that's a cost, we have to collect money to support. Can we just not have to collect that money to start with, and keep our rates lower? So it's an economic sometimes decision, and keeping rates as affordable as possible, that sometimes really plays a very critical role in those. Whereas the regulated utilities have some PSC and some other ancillary commitments and encouragement that require me to do some of those programs where locally we're not necessarily required to under state statutes or otherwise.
One thing to think about too on the rural side, I worked with Mizzou for about 10 years, and we had a consortium with buildings, ag energy, and things like that. Obviously, in rural areas, we had a lot of energy demand on the ag side. Poultry producers use a tremendous amount of energy. A lot of it propane, which is super expensive to heat houses with, and chicken houses with. And looking at those things, you have LED lighting now, and just changing those fixtures out not only improves the energy efficiency, it actually improves the health of those flocks. So, looking at some of those things and pulling it together with Missouri Electric Cooperative, which is like 5 blocks down the street from DNR, using some of those big financial blasts to look at those sorts of things, because those are big energy demands. That and industry, we want industry out here in the rural areas, of course, they're big energy users. So if we can, reduce that demand, it's a big swing.
If I can. So.
Yeah, I'll just add, if you want more programs, if you don't feel you're in a private utility or particularly in a co-op, to death, that would lead us here. In other words, James Brown, get into it and get involved. Show up.
Yeah.
Don't just show up November every 4 years to cast one ballot. Every Tuesday, go to city council meetings, go to public service commission meetings. Pardon my language, raise hell. The loud, the squeak release the oil. So if the programs aren't there to support your community in a way that you feel it needs to be supported, then foster the community demand the programs that are needed. It's hard. Nobody wants to do that, but the market is not going to do it itself.
Okay. And I think we have time for one more question, and we'll have to keep our responses somewhat brief.
In order to stay on schedule.
So my question from Civil Engineering Department. I have a question related to resilience after natural disaster. You know that after natural disaster, there's two main components to ensure you are resilient. You need to make sure that the disruption is limited, and also you need to restore your services as quickly as possible. So my question is related to how confident you are right now about your making decisions if the next natural disaster will happen. Do you know the exact places that we need services? Do you know the capacity of your recovery or repair? The critical component of your network and how you understand all this, and all of this can be linked. And is that a factor when you make decisions about investment? Is natural disaster is a factor? Or I need to allocate this investment in this area because it's critical. It's servicing a hospital or servicing a school. So, thank you.
I'll bring a state perspective and hand it off to our private stakeholders. From a public perspective, yes, that is what we plan for. State energy offices in all states and territories manage state energy security plans, and we prepare or try to plan for these kinds of situations, natural disasters. And it doesn't inform our direct investment a lot of times, or explicit, like who will provide funding to. It will help us determine what kinds of programs we will do, yes. But it will absolutely influence engagement at state and federal levels, depending on risk to natural hazards. But that said, and this goes along with any of the last question too. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's up to the community leaders to take that extra step and play ball. Go for those investments that are there. It won't just be done for them.
We have time for probably one more response.
Yeah, you can go. So yeah, I think talking to the local implementation of that resiliency planning there's definitely utilities that's part of what we're doing from an engineering perspective and a planning perspective. That Terry this transition to the administrative also is looking at a holistic level of where is that critical infrastructure? Every customer is critical. Where is that sometimes the differentiation of that criticality? Hospitals and police stations, stuff like that. I know we've made some changes to our distribution system over a number of years that undergrounding in some places. Undergrounding is more resilient for an outage. Sometimes when an outage does occur on that underground, it takes longer to recover. But obviously that's the economics of it play into because undergrounding is a lot more expensive to install and maintain. So it's trying to find that right balance of and it is looking at also, and Terry mentioned it too, was having the technology out there that you can respond quicker because you have a better idea of where that localization was. Sometimes even down to the meter itself, knowing which meter is out, as opposed to the entire circuit of 2,000 customers, figuring out where the problem was that originated the problem, down to the technology. But that technology, like everything, is there's a cost to get it implemented.
Thank you. So again, I apologize if we didn't get to your question. The great news is our experts are going to be here the rest of the workshop, and you can ask one-on-one. They are going to be participating in the next part as well. So they may be at the table that you end up. That is one thing that we're going to do before we go to break is figure out what table you'll be working at. I'm going to hand the microphone off to Casey. Before we do that, let's give a quick round of applause to our experts.